Morning AWS, and welcome to the AWS Morning Brief. I'm cloud economist Corey Quinn, gathering all the news from the AWS ecosystem and then gently making fun of it. This episode is sponsored in part by Influx Data, the creators of InfluxDB. InfluxDB is like Amazon TimeStream, except for the part where it has paying customers. In addition to being actually available for your use, it's also the de facto time series database you're using if you need a time series database. They've got other products available as well, both as open source as well as via managed service offerings. Check them out at influxdata.com. Now let's figure out what Amazon did last week. Amazon Chime adds call history for voice and video calls, but the way they rolled this out meant that I was staring at an undismissible red star for the last week on my phone. That's right, I am the second most popular Amazon Chime customer, the first being Amazon themselves. The top 5 are rounded out by nobody else. Amazon Document DB with MongoDB compatibility adds support for slow query logging. Why would I want my query logging to be slow, asks Ben Kehoe, and he's right. Amazon ECS now supports per container swap space parameters, making the thing that is less confusing than Kubernetes slightly more confusing. Amazon Elasticache announces online vertical scaling for Redis cluster mode and improves scaling non-Redis cluster mode. Awesome. Terrific. Non-Redis cluster mode is also, for most of us, known simply as Memcached. Amazon EMR announces support for runtime installation of external libraries with EMR notebooks. If you use notebooks to keep your code together, you are almost certainly not an ops person, but are instead a dyed-in-the-wool data scientist. Good for you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But as to the rest of us, we sort of wonder, are we talking bound wireframe things with paper? It's just not clear. Amazon EMR introduces block public access configuration to secure EMR clusters from unintentional network exposure. Following in the heels of S3 doing this a year or so ago, it's the right move to protect customers from their own misconfigurations. Amazon Forecast is now generally available. This is a service that takes a bunch of data in and determines what is likely to happen next. You can tell it's not ready for prime time by testing it on your AWS bill. Amazon Neptune is now available in the AWS GovCloud East region, as well as just beyond the orbit of Uranus. Amazon Redshift now recommends distribution keys for improved query performance. For budget performance, it recommends absolutely not using Amazon Redshift. Are you moving to the cloud? Perhaps you're already there. Logic Monitor is introducing LM Cloud as a new sponsor for this show to help you maximize your investment in AWS. You can save time and resources with Logic Monitor's automated discovery, pre-configured logic modules, built-in alerting thresholds, and out-of-the-box dashboards for your visual enjoyment. This helps you get visibility into your cloud workloads alongside legacy on-prem environments. So the idea that they're promising here is a single pane of glass view into your entire distributed infrastructure. If you want to learn more about how LM Cloud can make your team more efficient, effective, and, to be honest here, nicer to be around, check them out at logicmonitor.com. My thanks to them for sponsoring this ridiculous podcast. Even more ridiculous, Amazon SQS now supports tag and create. SQS itself is one of the first services ever released in AWS and does itself predate tags. They wanted to wait until tags were nice and ready before they started deploying support for them. Well, here we are. Amazon Transcribe now supports speech-to-text in Russian and Chinese Mandarin. This is helpful, specifically as we gear up for the next American presidential election. There will be many, many Russian documents that will be likely to need translating after this decade's equivalent of the Nixon tapes come to light. AWS Data Sync can now transfer data to and from SMB file shares. What is Data Sync? Well, it's like rsync, except you pay for it as a managed service. AWS IoT Core adds the ability to configure quality of service, or QoS, for republish actions. What is that? Nobody knows because it's under the banner of IoT. Unless you're deploying robots, you're probably not using a lot of the awesome services under that umbrella. AWS Systems Manager Parameter Store is now available in both of the AWS China regions. One thing I've never bothered to ask is whether, when translated into Chinese, all of the AWS Systems Manager sub-services sound as ridiculous and repetitive as they do in English. You can now easily enable AWS Systems Manager capabilities with Quick Setup, also known as AWS Systems Manager Onboarding Manager, or should be. Amazon has introduced AI-powered health data masking. It doesn't claim to block all personally identifiable information, but claims to do its very best anyway. There's a new quick start to deploy Amazon Redshift on the AWS cloud. Amazon Redshift is part of the AWS cloud, so if you wind up deploying it somewhere else, where the hell might that be, and what might that even look like? Support for Windows shadow copies is now extended to all Amazon FSx file systems. This had been done historically for Windows file systems. The only other FSx file system available is going to be Lustre. Do you use Windows shadow copies on Lustre? Can you use Windows shadow copies on Lustre? The world may never know. Is this just their way of getting double credit for the same feature? I'm sure someone will angrily email in to correct me, or find me on Twitter at QuinnyPig. That's QUINNYPIG. And lastly, 9 AWS Security Hub best practices were listed on the AWS Security blog. The first one is, of course, bring money. That's all that happened this week in the world of AWS. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I am cloud economist Corey Quinn at the Duckbill Group, fixing AWS bills here in San Francisco or wherever I happen to find them. Thank you, and have a great week.
This has been a Humble Pod production. Stay humble.